Hello everyone, welcome to another Let's Talk HR, and today we're taking on the topic of technology. Technology can in many ways make our lives easier, but there's always an opportunity with technology to take things too far and be a little bit too intrusive. Today I am joined by Lee, Gail and Claire, and we're going to try and go through some of the biggest questions that we've got and some of the biggest trends coming in HR, L&D and coaching technology. Lee, I was going to say, how's lovely York in this summer weather, but you just told me that you're in a hotel room. So how far away have they put you?
I wouldn't know how lovely York is, but I know that lovely Birmingham is sunny.
So no drinks by the Riveroos or anything like that at the moment, saving that for the weekend.
There may be a glass of wine just out of shot.
And Claire, sunny Rochdale, isn't it?
No, I'm in Mosley, which is East Manchester. I don't know why I'm doing that again. East Manchester, yeah, 10 miles from the city centre.
Oh, very close.
Yeah.
And you just started a new job recently, and how are you settling in?
Yeah, it's good, thank you. That's in Bradford, but I can work virtually now because of COVID. So yeah, it's a lot easier to do a job somewhere else and not have to travel every day.
And Gail, in the UK, we've got a little bit of sunshine, so we're getting very excited and very happy at this moment in time. How are things over in Canada?
It's still winter here for some strange reason. I am still clearing about a foot of snow off my deck.
Wow. And one of the things I love about Canada, you get proper seasons, don't you? When it's hot, and when it's cold, it's like 10 foot of snow and you're digging your car out and stuff like that. We get like a millimetre of snow here and everyone's complaining, I can't come to work today. There's too much snow on the road.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Work from home.
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk about technology, as I mentioned earlier, and I guess one of the biggest technologies has been the introduction of hybrid working from home, and being able to utilize this type of technology that we're using here for meetings, teams, and interactions. Lee, how are you finding this sort of virtual revolution of meetings? Is it better or worse than face-to-face meetings for you?
Yeah, good question. I think it comes with pros and cons. I think it depends how much we use it. I think during COVID, it's been 2 years, so we've kind of got out of the habit of seeing people both socially and outside and inside of work. So I think as long as we still make the effort to meet in real life, then I think technology helps us. I think that having meetings like this helps us because it just makes communication and collaboration a lot easier. But if we rely on it too heavily, which I've seen happen, then it can be a little bit problematic. I think it can be easy to rely on it too heavily because it can be cheaper to rely on it too heavily instead of traveling. And then teams are not brought together. And in the worst case, that can become quite toxic because people just don't know each other anymore. You know, we don't have that genuine rapport that we would if we were face to face. But if it's used right, if it's used rightly, rather, then we get to collaborate more. We get to connect with people a lot more with our teams and outside of our teams as well.
And Claire, one of the things that I found myself using a lot more, with the grow of Zoom and Microsoft Teams is instant messenger within businesses. But it can be a pressurized thing, can't it, to respond to an instant message instantly, hence the name instant messenger, when you're trying to balance objectives and workload and projects. How are you finding that balance at this moment in time?
Oh, that's hard, isn't it? Because I think I've started 2 new jobs in the pandemic, which is, I think, some sort of record, isn't it? And actually, I've tried to be really clear around my boundaries in each one to make sure that people don't understand. But I think you can own that as the person responding to the message. So if somebody messages you, it's in your kind of control. I think the thing that frustrates me is there's a kind of expectation of availability when you're on virtual work. So even if we use Teams in work, and when your status is red or do not disturb, people are still messaging you as if, it's still okay. And I think we've lost that human element where somebody could walk into an office, see you're busy with somebody, and albeit some people still interrupt you when you're in an office with somebody, but in the main, people see it as a physical presence and then they walk away. But Teams is, because people can't see you, they have a different virtual view of what you're doing. It's almost sometimes like you sat there waiting to respond to people. I think a lot of my team say that as well.
And Gail, one of the things we see a lot of, especially in these virtual meetings, is people go on mute. They just switch off immediately, don't they? And then you just see their eyes going down just like this. Right away. TikTok's the new one, isn't it? How do you ensure that you've got the engagement with people when you're trying to sort of talk on a virtual level and that people aren't missing the messages? That was hard to say.
That's an interesting question. I find that sometimes you can't get that engagement. I know for me, when I'm having online meetings with my staff, we have our meetings online and cameras on. But if I'm in a training session or a meeting with people outside of my organization, a lot of the times people have their cameras off, and myself included, unless I'm going to speak and I unmute and I turn my camera on so that people can see me then. For myself, I also teach part-time, and the classes I teach are online, and I have never had a student have their camera on. And I don't know if that's lack of engagement or lack of technology. They're students. Maybe they're dialing in from their cell phone and they don't want to use their cameras because it takes up too much data. Or they don't have their laptop, or they're traveling, or whatever it is. So there are valid reasons for these students not to have their cameras on.
And Lee, how do you're in L&D and you'll be delivering training sessions and potentially you'll be delivering it to people that are experienced in the industry going, well, I know all this, so I'll just let him talk, switch off. Every so often I'll unmute and go, yeah, I agree. And then go back on mute and disappear again. How do you get that engagement for people so that they can start to embed in the culture? Because that's really what suffers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right in saying that cameras and microphones being on are absolutely crucial to that. I mean, let's face it, if you were sat in a room face to face and someone was just banging on at you, not to put it too bluntly, you'd probably switch off as well. As long as you warn people in advance, that I don't think it's a problem to ask them to put their cameras on for a training session and ask for that to be mandatory, really. I hate to use the word mandatory, but if they were face to face, we'd be able to see them. So why is that going to be different just because they're at home? And I know Teams, I don't really use Zoom, but I know Teams has the blurred background. So it doesn't matter if they're in their own homes, we're not going to see their homes. You haven't got that intrusion. So I think a large part of the engagement is the fact that they've got the cameras on, and you can see the reactions, because that's a huge part of communication, isn't it? That you can see people's body language. So you're right, you can see when their eyes go down to TikTok. You can also see when their eyes go over there at their other screen, and then the reflection changes because they've just flicked their emails on. And you can call a break, or you can call them out and ask them to stop it.
One of the big trends, when I was reading about trends and HR trends and culture shifts, and one of the big things that they were saying is anonymous reporting of people is going to be one of the biggest things that is going to be implemented over the next year or so. Now, I see some benefits to people being able to flag issues and problems anonymously, but I can also see the flip side, which is some potential bullying and focusing on a particular individual to get them out because they don't write and stuff like that. Claire, is anonymous reporting going to work, or is it just another one of these ideas that we're not, that hasn't been fully thought through yet as to how it can be implemented?
I think that exists now, doesn't it? I just think, and actually, when you mention the words anonymous reporting, I think of trolling. So through social media, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. And the fact that people can, keyboard warriors, people hide behind screens to say something that they wouldn't usually say face to face. And I had a message today of somebody asking for a HR problem, and I suggested she go and speak to the person that she had an issue with, because my first line of advice is always talk to the person involved, regardless of whether we're working virtually or not. A lot of HR issues and a lot of issues in the workplace stem from people not wanting to speak out, or actually not feeling they're enabled to, or have that permission to do so, or being in a culture. So I don't think anonymous reporting at this point in time is going to be more dangerous and more harmful than good, because I think we're not in the space where we've established our cultures post-COVID to actually withstand that happening. So I've seen complaints in my role definitely increasing. It's almost as if people now have this ability to just go, I'm just going to send an email and that's it, I've dealt with it. Whereas in the normal workplace, in the day-to-day activity stuff, they wouldn't have done it. So yeah, I'm firmly on the side of, I don't think it's a good idea at this point in time. Not never.
And Gail, is anonymous reporting used in Canada, or is it another one of these concepts that is being thrown around in the UK and it's not really something that you could see working over there?
I think that it's mostly perhaps a UK thing. In Canada, we do a lot of organizations have programs called Whistleblower Programs, where you can report, and I mean, they know who you are, but that remains confidential. That if I make a complaint or file a complaint about a situation or a policy that's been breached or anything like that, that information, that complaint came from me would remain confidential while that department or company did their investigation. So maybe that is like anonymous, but it certainly, I would know that who was making that complaint, and that company, if I'm making a complaint, they would know it was me making that complaint. It would just be, it wouldn't be public knowledge, I guess.
I think that's a really good point, isn't it? In terms of HR should be that anonymous complaint area. If someone's got something that they feel is severe, they should feel like they're comfortable to go to them. And sometimes I guess some organizations don't feel comfortable speaking to HR, and that's probably more the issue than it is another piece of technology, another piece of software, so someone can write something down and send it to senior management. I'm just getting nods, so I'm going to move on to the next piece. Lee, tracking software. Organizations now, people are working from home, don't necessarily always believe people are working from home. And I think some of the culture of social media, you know, where it shows fans moving a mouse back and forth, and you see videos of people faking like they're not working and stuff like that. And I think it creates that doubt in leaders' minds that people are not doing it. So they're like, well, I want to track everything everybody does. So is it a step too far of privacy, or you're paying them to do a job and therefore you have the right to see what they're doing during the hours that you're paying for?
Well, I'm glad you came to me for this one, because I have quite a strong opinion on it. I really don't like it. I think we spend so long in HR and in learning and development, developing managers and leaders, developing people to have confidence, and it all starts in one place, which is psychological safety. And what is psychological safety? Trust. We need to be able to trust people that they are doing their jobs. And how is someone going to feel trusted if we're there watching them, particularly if that's on their camera? And if that's in their own homes, I know I said earlier that, you know, it's not intrusive if it's in their own homes, if they've got that background blur on. But how can we just turn someone's camera on and be looking in their own homes? You know, I can just imagine the disciplinary procedures that will come our way because of people getting up to, you know, all kinds of things that is not appropriate for work, but it's in their own home. So how can we hear that disciplinary? Where do we draw the line there? And I think in reference to, you mentioned, you know, we're paying them to do a job. Hopefully we'd know if they weren't doing their job, because hopefully their job is important enough or worthwhile enough, them doing it, that we would miss it if it wasn't there. You know, if they're assessing quality in a call center, we'd know because no calls were being looked at. If they were in learning and development, I'd know because no training had been created or delivered. Or, you know, there's 100 different examples. But yeah, hopefully we'd notice if they weren't doing their job. And I think that checking on the objectives and the really effective line management is how we'd know. Basic line management actually is how we would know if they weren't doing their job. And I really don't think we should be turning people's cameras on. And I mean, if we are, we need to tell them we're going to do it, for one, but I really don't think we should be turning people's cameras on to check up that they're actually at their laptop or not.
Yeah, I don't think it was necessarily when I was reading the article, I don't think it was necessarily cameras, Claire. I think it was more, are they, has their computer been idle for 5 minutes? Have they been doing this? A little like call center analytics of how long between calls have you taken? How long have you taken to respond to emails? How long has your mouse been static for? What websites are you on that aren't, work related, and how long are you spending on different tabs? And I guess it comes to, I think Lee nailed it where he said it comes down to trust of managers, but it's normally middle managers that get the rough end of the stick, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I hope no one looks how many tabs I've got open at any one point because they might get really stressed. But I'm with Lee on this. It's trust and it's psychological safety. And actually, I've had this argument with directors before where I say, well, somebody can be in an office and not doing work. And I used to be in an office with several offices. So my teams would be across I can't be in every office for the whole period of time. And actually, people are allowed to go to the toilet. I find virtual working doesn't allow for that. Those breaks and, Teams meetings, they literally go from hour to hour. You don't even have a chance to go for a wee. So you just think, for God's sake, at what point am I allowed to have those 5 minutes? Because you do in the office, you do. I mean, I used to go and walk to other offices and speak to people about things because it's easier to do that when you're physically present. But, the whole... And I guess I read something earlier because I was prepping for this session this evening. I wanted to look at sort of articles on it. And actually, I think if it's two-way, so if the staff can see or the teams can see where the manager is, I think that would go down in a lot more positively than if it's just one way, because it is very big brother. I have trust in my teams and that's how I lead them and that's how I manage. And until they give me a reason not to, but they need to do that. And then that's how I work and that's how I operate as a leader. And I think that's really relevant and important to behave like that. I just don't think it's fair it's almost spying and, it just feels really wrong and icky. That's the word I need, icky.
And Gail, normally it comes down to managerial anxiety, doesn't it? In terms of the pressure they're feeling from an organization to achieve an objective. They not necessarily get on with a few people, and therefore it comes down to their anxiety that they're not doing the job. How do you coach somebody like that to trust the managers, the teams to do their jobs? How do you make someone feel more comfortable? Because as much as it's difficult for the employee, it's difficult for the manager when they're under that sort of level of pressure as well, isn't it? How do we help them?
I am on the same page as Lee and Claire on this. And I track hours to pay my staff, but I don't track to make sure that they're working every minute of every hour of every day. I track their results and the impact that they're making. And, some companies track their revenue or that kind of thing. And their minute by minute, hour to hour actions on moving the mouse on their computer isn't important. And creating that kind of environment creates a poor culture. And if you're tracking every minute of every day like that, you're going to lose those employees. Now, your employee safety when they're working virtually. So things like ergonomics, stuff like that. If there's going to be a workplace injury, how do you know that employee has a safe walking space to go from their desk at home to their bathroom, or that their chairs and computers are set up appropriately so that they're not getting physical injuries while they're working from home? That is the question that I have.
I'll answer it from a previous organization perspective so that Lee and Claire don't put a foot in it. Where I worked previously, we set up the contract, and this may be wrong, but we set up the contract in such a way where they opted to work from home, so we didn't have to set up the ergonomics, we didn't have to set up the computer system, we didn't have to set up anything like that. If they wanted to come to an office, they could have that, they could have all that support, but the contract stated that they had the option so that we didn't have to pay for all that kit. All we had to pay for was the laptop, which is then you have to pay for what they need to work for. But everything else was worded in a way so that we didn't have to pay for it. Which is,
I want to hear what Lee's going to say, because I've got, sorry, Gail.
So I think it's going to be only beneficial to the business if we can recruit people who we know are going to work from home, and we know that they can't come to the office. And in that case, if we go down that route, the option that you just mentioned, James, isn't probably going to be an option. For example, the company I work for is based in Colchester. I live in York. For those that are not in the UK, that's a 3-hour drive away. They know I'm not going to be coming to the office on a regular basis. So my contract is home-based, and the company assumes the responsibility then for making sure that the ergonomics and so on that Gail mentioned are there. So how do we do it? Well, there has to be an element of ownership from the delegate, from the staff member. Yeah. So we've got effective learning and development modules, just e-learnings, really simple, that really clearly tell someone how to assess their own DSE space. And so as long as they do that, as long as the delegates follow what the instructions in the e-learning, and then the company can, as you mentioned, James, pay for whatever equipment is necessary. I've been given a desk, I've bought my own chair, I've got a headset, I've got everything that I need. So as long as that, the delegate takes some ownership of that, or the staff member takes some ownership, and then the business does what they need to do. However, I will sort of add on to Gail's question, which is, you mentioned about like effective walk space. That effective walk space can be there, but if they've got to go downstairs to get to the kitchen, they can still fall down the stairs.
Yeah.
God forbid, but they can still fall down the stairs. If they're working from home on their own, which I do, who knows? So I guess, is there an element of, of safety there? If we're asking someone to work from home and we know that there's no one else there, do we need to check in that they're still with us? Not to put a finer point on it, but how do we make sure an accident hasn't happened and they're actually safe, and someone knows if they're not safe?
I'd like to add a point to that as well, Lee, that that's all very well and good, and yes, it's great that the ownership, I totally agree with you. I think if you're employed, you have an ownership, or you have a responsibility towards your health and safety, whether you're at home or in the office or whatever workspace that you work in. But I think when we come to the crux of it, so we are trying to be inclusive. So people who have disabilities, we need to get a little bit better at this. We're not great at it anyway. Definitely in the UK, there's a lot that we could do that could have a lot more positive impact. And I read an article about this lady who'd been unemployed for years, and because of virtual working, she's now got a job that she can do from home, and she doesn't have to travel, go on public transport, all this stuff. And I think we also we still have a responsibility to those people to make sure their working environment's safe. And equally, there was an article that I read online. I was talking about it in work last week, but it was a while ago. I think it was a guy in Germany who fell down his spiral. Did you guys see this? Spiral staircase, and claimed on his insurance for an accident at work, and he got a payout. And I was like, that is the most bizarre. That's going to happen. So we don't. If you Google it, it's on the internet. It's there. I think he was in Germany, but he had a fall at home down his own spiral staircase, and he actually had a successful claim because he was at work. And I just think it makes me go a little bit, oh, this is just going to start happening now, isn't it? In the UK, we're going to start having people put claims in.
Well, we talked about this a little bit with Change yesterday, which is one of the things people need to constantly look at and change is their policies and procedures, because there we go, Claire. You promised it'd happen. Policies and procedures, because a lot of the times they're not fit for purpose anymore, but they don't get changed until something goes wrong. And then someone claims, like falling down their stairs and claiming against the company insurance. So a lot of the time, something bad will happen and then the policies will change. And this sounds like one of those situations where then they'll rewrite the policy to protect the organization, but they've had to pay out in this instance.
Yes, my dog has now stopped barking, so I can answer the question. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I haven't read the whole, but I definitely know it's a thing that's happened, and it'll be interesting to see how much more of that starts making an appearance online. I'm watching this space, definitely.
One of the things that I used to work under was language tracking software. And I've worked in education for a long time. Part of it is safeguarding so that there's no grooming, there's no elements of that, there's no racism, there's no bullying, and it would, when you said a certain word, it would screenshot that picture of what was being said, and it would send it to HR. HR would then look at it, and they would send it to the line manager to review. Now, there's an element with, as we've mentioned, keyboard warriors, anonymous people, abuse, bullying, online types of things, where actually this could be quite a beneficial piece of software for organizations, because if someone says something now online and they work and they represent a brand, that brand can be really negatively impacted. But again, is it a step too far in terms of invasion of privacy? Lee, is it better for safeguarding for 16 to 18-year-olds to have this type of software so that people are protected when they're in the environments more than it is professionals?
Yeah, good question. I think definitely, or any kind of vulnerable people. I mean, there's all kinds of industries out there, charities, in fact, even hotels now. I was speaking to a hotel recently trying to book a venue for something, and they have an asylum seeker contract, and so they're vulnerable people. So, you know, there's examples of vulnerable people, whether they're young or for whatever different reason, all across society, and the more we can do to protect them, the better. I know that I had quite strong opinions about surveillance earlier, but I'm actually doing a U-turn on this one, because my view on surveillance to some extent is, if you're not doing anything wrong, then you're not actually going to get caught out, if that makes sense. And the same with CCTV and different things when you're out in the public. I think if this software is only going to pick up if you say, you know, what's the word, like a predefined bad word, that's the only time you're going to get recorded. Well, if you didn't say the bad word, if you weren't, I'm making an assumption, if you weren't bullying someone, if you weren't saying the bad word, then you wouldn't have got recorded. So I think, and also even outside of vulnerable people, we do have a responsibility as a business to ensure that our staff are not being bullied. So if we can take steps to avoid that from happening, you know, how many different people have we ever come across that have left the business because they've been bullied, but they didn't feel confident enough to raise it as a grievance? We've got the evidence right there in front of us. Then they don't need to have to take that leap and that step. We've got the evidence in front of us to take action for them. Surely that goes towards a diverse and inclusive approach, I should say.
And Claire, what do you think? It shouldn't go straight to the line manager first. I think it probably needs that HR. Is this just, you know, one of the things that landed to me was, this is killing me. Because they used the word killing and me, then it flagged as a potential thing. But they just, it was said in a context of, this work is killing me. And that's fine. I gave another example. There was a Chinese guy that worked for me, and his official name was Ching, and that flagged up as potentially racist every time, but that was just his name. He called himself Norman, and he was in the system as Norman. Therefore, when he was talking to people at home, it would flag up as potentially racist. And it converted from Chinese, I'll have you know, which I thought was uber impressive. So there needs to be a filter, doesn't there? It can't just go straight to line managers, because that is just an overstep of people just saying so-and-so is annoying me, and it's something in out of context that's taken a screenshot and not really fair.
And actually, do you know what? When do we lose? We're going to lose people's confidence to have honest conversations with their colleagues. So I'm hoping we've all done this, but you know, sometimes when I'm frustrated, I'll have a colleague that I trust, that I will bounce stuff off, a mentor, and you know, there's hopefully no really naughty words in there, but you know, there may be swear words. I'm just using an example. But equally, do you think that technology can, this is probably a question for everyone else, do you think that technology can keep up with slang, especially in the UK? So I am well out my teenage years now, unfortunately. But you know, language evolving, and I listen to radio presenters and they say words, and I'm like, I've never heard of that word, and I have to look on the Urban Dictionary, and they can mean all different things. And sometimes you can say something. So my mum's first language isn't English. So she might say something that isn't appropriate because her first language isn't English. So there's a lot of layers to this, really, isn't there, that you need to consider, that because if it's a red flag, right, you're out, we're going to run into a lot of difficulty. So I guess, and then it's HR again being the guardian of these things, and actually their workload going up. So I'm really conscious of that, because I work in an ops role, and I always think about, what can we do differently to make it easier for everybody, and not and actually we want to create an industry or a culture that's not full of fear. And I do think language technology, the way you've described it when we chatted earlier, is not a really positive way. I get how it could be really positive. Like, don't get me wrong. I think it would add a lot of value, but with a limited number of words, I don't think as a whole piece it would be very beneficial to businesses. Just my opinion.
You're just flagging up every day, aren't you? Going on Urban Dictionary, looking things up.
On my phone, which isn't a work one. I'm not doing that on my work computer. But equally, James, I've worked in the NHS. Sometimes you type things in the NHS, and something comes. It says this site is blocked, and you go, bloody hell! What did I type? So I just said, bloody hell! What did I type in? What? And then people are looking at your computer going, what have you typed in? I'm like, well, just type this in, or something really random comes up. Even on a Google search, sometimes you type something in and you just think, that's not what I wanted.
And typos happen, don't they? And I guess in answer, keeping up with vernacular, how things change, how language has moved on now to just emojis, hasn't it? As opposed to just words. This is kind of where machine learning, AI, and tracking sort of comes in. And to really implement machine learning, you've got to have a big source of data. You can't just narrow it down to a few words and stuff like that. So a bit like Google and Alexa, where they're constantly running, learning, and taking in information. Do organizations just need to take in information to then refine it down? But if you're taking in that much information, Gail, are you invading privacy to then try to protect people?
That's a really tough question. And I think that it really depends on the organization. I know for me, most of my work experience is with small to medium-sized businesses. And that, to me, would just be a waste of HR's time. But maybe in a larger organization, I'm talking, tens of thousands of employees, that might be something that is credible for them to help improve their company image, or to train staff, or even find areas that there's discrimination or inequity. But I think for the most part, it's quite intrusive.
Oh, you've gone on me. I don't know if she has for everybody else. Yep. You just dropped out at the end, Gail.
Oh, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
I can now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can now. You just dropped out at the end.
Darn technology.
Lee, I thinking about things like chatbots and implementation of chatbots, so that people can find information without having to ring HR and constantly ask questions. Where's this? My opinion on chatbots is it's for organizations that don't have a well enough structured data flow, so people can find the information themselves. Therefore, they need something to help convert the structure that they've got. Have you seen a chatbot implemented well anywhere?
No, I haven't. Companies that use chatbots for customers tend to put me off a little bit because it never works. I've never seen one work. Maybe within internal, though, maybe there is a little bit of an opportunity, but I think it's very, very unique to the business. For example, today, the head of talent in my organization noticed that on our induction, we had a code for our wellbeing app. So our employee assistance program is through an app, and that keeps it anonymous and so on. But the organization, our business, has a code to use it. And he said that he'd get 90 emails a day sometimes asking for that code. So if we had a chatbot, they could say, I can't remember the name of the app, but what's the code? It could supply them with the code. I know that's a real basic example. I can't think of anything more useful. I think perhaps if speaking about anonymity that we spoke about earlier, I think perhaps if delegates had questions around how to raise a grievance, how to ask things about if they were being bullied, how to deal with that, and all, or maybe anything around diversity and inclusion, things that are maybe that little bit more sensitive to ask about, that we in HR probably take for granted because we would just go to the policy, and we live and breathe the policy of the organisation that we're in, and we probably know the law about it too. But people outside of our function, outside of HR, don't know that. They're not, they don't know what we know because that's not their specialism. So maybe if they could ask the bot questions about that on an anonymous, there we go, anonymous in an anonymous way, that would be better. And then maybe they'd get a more coherent answer than what I'm trying to say.
But a well-defined file structure and being able to search, how do I raise a grievance in your shared folders, would be just as easy as asking a chatbot for it, wouldn't it, Claire? It's just, as we know, most organizations, files upon files upon folders upon folders upon subfolders upon subfolders, organizations over time, that the whole folder structure just becomes chaotic, and people can't find anything.
I was just thinking about this as Lee was chatting. So I've managed transactional services. I think in transactional services where there's a specific, this is what you do answer, I think, yes, absolutely, there's a benefit. I think in HR generally, especially with employee relations cases, or I've got this problem, the things with artificial intelligence, I remember doing psychology A-level and talking about artificial intelligence in the 90s, and it seems such a great idea, but we can't figure out the human brain as humans over a massive span of time. So I find it a bit difficult that somebody can come along with a machine and then all of a sudden figure out how a human would respond. That's like as an aside, but I just think, transactional stuff and where to find stuff, and the low level things that people ring you and ask, like the app that Lee's just described about how do I get on the app. Absolutely, that can cut out lots of repetitive things, but not stuff like I've got to take time off because my child's ill, but this happened and what do I do? Because there's like layers of complexity in those questions that the bot just goes, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're asking me. And we all know that. I was on a banking app earlier, and it's like, tell me what you want. And I told the bot what I wanted, and it goes, I'm sorry, can you pick from these 4? And I'm like, no, it's not those 4 options. I need something else. So it's frustrating, isn't it? But I think it works in some senses, but not in others.
Yes, it's a bit like when you ring a number and it goes, press 1, straight away. A part of me dies. The second I hear press 4, and because you're going to have to listen to all of them.
Yes.
You're never going to get that time back in your life. And then you're going to press a number and it's going to give you another 4 options.
Try ringing the home office. Ringing the home office. Trust me.
But we're bashing technology here. And it's because innovation sometimes it's just for innovation's sake. It's not necessarily addressing a problem. And when technology does address a problem, it's really beneficial, and it really sort of solves an organizational and a people problem. So for the last part, I just want to ask each of you to think of a technology that's been introduced in your career that has significantly benefited staff and had some positive improvement. I'm not going to start with Claire because she looks really like I've thrown her with the question. But Gail, let me start with you. In what way has technology helped improve employee experience?
Well, I think the biggest one is probably Office 365. And I mean, I know it's been around for a while, but I look back at even 5-6 years ago. So I used to live in Fort McMurray, Canada, and we all got evacuated in 2016 because of a fire. And we didn't have Office 365 at that time. And so it was really hard to stay connected and be able to manage our folders and our files. And then fast forward to 2020, when the pandemic came, we had Office 365, and it was really easy to stay connected with our our staff and the files and continue working regardless of where we were. So just those few years of different situation, but similar in the same way, just being able to work remotely without that interruption is absolutely priceless.
Lee, what about for you? A technology that's benefited people's working lives?
I'm going to cheat. I'm going to go with 2.
It's fine. You want to give one to Claire?
Sorry, Claire, I'm stealing them. I think the first one I'm going to go with on a really basic level. I know it's not new technology, but instant messaging of any kind, whether that's Skype, Teams, Slack,
MSN.
I think is another one. Yeah, MSN. Gosh, I'm showing our age now.
MySpace, Messenger.
Bebo. I think the way that has improved collaboration, we don't have to send a wordy email anymore. We don't have to walk over to someone's desk, and let's face it, we're not all in the same office anymore. Even again, on a basic level, I've got someone in my team who has a few medical issues. Even if we are sat next to each other, if she wants to just walk off and take a break, she can just quickly tap away on the computer. It's sent to me immediately, and I don't say, "Oh, where are you going?" in front of everyone. I think that can only help. And of course, on a greater level, the collaboration that allows across organizations, particularly as more organizations involve more people with decision making now, more different teams, we can get in touch easier and quicker. My other one, with my L&D hat on, making really engaging learning development sessions, from anything through to training systems, right through to leadership development with directors and whoever it's going to be, is your Kahoots and Mentimeters and things like that of this world that allow people to engage directly. So anything where delegates, no matter where they are in the world, can input answers to questions so that we can talk about it. They can draw things, they can talk to each other, anything that'll really allow them to engage. And that's not even just working from home. I do that in the room as well. I've got an induction coming up with 40 people, and I've got things that I would have used at home. I've discovered them through working at home. I'll be using that in the room as well, so that all their voices can be heard and engage further in the session.
And Claire, we've given you some time to think.
Yeah, I have. I've thought of one. Can I use mobile phones? I'm only joking.
Yeah.
It's only because I didn't
Snake,
have.
great game.
I'm from an era where when I was in university, I had to queue up at a phone box to ring my parents. There was no mobile phones, and I know I don't look that old, do I? Mine's social media platforms. So I think in the absence of the fact that I use Twitter and LinkedIn, I wouldn't be sat here today contributing to this. So I think in terms of I use those platforms a lot for work. I find it very beneficial in terms of CPD, connecting with people around the world, not just in the UK. And you don't have to be sat next to somebody in a networking event anymore. You can connect online, and I think that's been a real game changer for me in the last few years. I mean, I've used Twitter on and off since about 2009. But I think it's a great platform, LinkedIn equally, but it's actually really enriched my profession, I think. So that's going to be mine.
Brilliant. And with those positives, I mean, for myself, I'll answer just, which is something like this, to be able to bring together people working in industry to create content that can help people studying, talking about things like technology when you're trying to work out the pros and cons of certain technologies in HR and write a paper on it to have people actually working in the industry experiencing these things, the reactions, and then to create that content and put it on a platform where people can access it. That's my positive, which is what we're trying to do here. But to summarize the discussion, technology for technology's sake, when you're trying to build something for HR, probably isn't the best thing. If you're trying to implement a technology, try to think about how it benefits the business as a whole. And if it benefits the business as a whole, HR will find a use for it. It's pretty much what we've been saying. But don't track everybody. Don't look at what everyone's doing. Trust people. And if you've got a problem with someone, speak to them as opposed to anonymously submitting something. By collaborating and working with people, you'll be able to achieve better enrichment in technology and better outcomes. And we all need to learn what emoji language is, by the sounds of things, when we all talked about how things change. This has been Let's Talk HR. This has been focusing on technology. Thank you very much to Lee, Gail, and Claire for contributing for today. This will be put available on our YouTube channel, and our commitment to making live content available for anyone studying a HR qualification, regardless if you're enrolled with us or not. I've been James Dean. Thank you very much.